The North American Rockwell OV-10 Bronco is a turboprop light attack and observation aircraft. It was developed in the 1960s as a special aircraft for counter-insurgency combat, and one of its primary missions was as a forward air control aircraft. It can carry up to 3 tons of external munitions, internal loads like paratroops or stretchers, and can loiter for 3 or more hours. Development. Background. The aircraft was initially conceived in the early 1960s through an informal collaboration between W. H. Beckett and Colonel K. P. Rice, U.S. Marine Corps, who met at Naval Air Weapons Station China Lake, California, and who also happened to live near each other. The original concept was for a rugged, simple, close air support aircraft integrated with forward ground operations. At the time, the U.S. Army was still experimenting with armed helicopters, and the U.S. Air Force was not interested in close air support. The concept aircraft was to operate from expedient forward air bases using roads as runways. Speed was to be from very slow to medium subsonic, with much longer loiter times than a pure jet. Efficient turboprop engines would give better performance than piston engines. Weapons were to be mounted on the centerline to get efficient unranged aiming like the Lockheed P-38 Lightning and North American F-86 Sabre aircraft. The inventors favored strafing weapons were self-loading recoilless rifles, which could deliver aimed explosive shells with less recoil than cannons, and a lower per-round weight than rockets. The airframe was to be designed to avoid the backblast. Beckett and Rice developed a basic platform meeting these requirements, then attempted to build a fiberglass prototype in a garage. The effort produced enthusiastic supporters and an informal pamphlet describing the concept. W. H. Beckett, who had retired from the Marine Corps, went to work at North American Aviation to sell the aircraft. Rice states, "The military definition of STOL allows takeoff and landing in most of the areas in which limited war might be fought. In addition, the airplane was designed to use roads so that operation would even be possible in jungle areas where clearings are few and far between. As a result, the wingspan was to be limited to 20 feet and a heavy trailing arm-type landing gear with a tread of 6.5 feet was provided for operation from roads. Float operation was to be feasible. It is quite feasible to design the various components so that it can be disassembled easily and stored in a box that would fit in a 6 truck bed together with the equipment needed for reassembly in the field. It could thus be transported by amphibious shipping and either heli-lifted or driven ashore by a 6x6 truck. Light Armed Reconnaissance Aircraft, a tri-service specification for the Light Armed Reconnaissance Aircraft was approved by the U.S. Navy, Air Force and Army and was issued in late 1963. The LARA requirement was based on a perceived need for a new type of jungle-fighting versatile light attack and observation aircraft. Existing military aircraft in the observation role, such as the Cessna 01 Bird Dog and Cessna 02 Skymaster, were perceived as obsolescent, with too slow a speed and too small a load capacity for this flexible role. The specification called for a twin-engine, 2-man aircraft that could carry at least 2,400 pounds of cargo, 6 paratroopers or stretchers, and be stressed for +8 and -3 gs. It also had to be able to operate from an aircraft carrier, fly at least 350 miles per hour, take off in 800 feet and convert to an amphibian. Various armament had to be carried, including 4 7.62 mm machine guns with 2,000 rounds, and external weapons including a 20 gun pod and AIM-9 Sidewinder air-to-air missiles. 11 proposals were submitted, 9 of them were the Grumman Model 134, a tandem seat version of the already fielded U.S. Army's OV-1 Mohawk, Goodyear GA-39, Beechcraft PD-183, Douglas D-855, Convair Model 48 Charger, Helio 1320, Lockheed CL-760, a Martin design, and the North American Aviation Rockwell NA-300. In August 1964, the NA-300 was selected. A contract for 7 prototype aircraft was issued in October 1964. Convair protested the decision and built a small-wing prototype of the Model 48 Charger anyway, which first flew on November 29, 1964. This was also a twin-boom aircraft that had a broadly similar layout to the OV-10. The Charger, while capable of outperforming the OV-10 in some respects, crashed on October 19, 1965 after 196 test flights. Convair subsequently dropped out of contention. The Bronco started flying midway through the Charger's test program on July 16, 1965, and became one of the premier counter-insurgency aircraft of the next 30 years. It failed to live up to Rice's L2VMA concept because the DoD insisted on 40-foot-long wings which made it depend on air bases. Rice concludes, "The original concept of a small, simple aircraft that could operate close to the supported troops had been almost completely eviscerated by the system. The ability to operate from roads had been ignored, and performance compromised by the short 30-feet span, the extra 1,000 pounds for the rough field landing gear and another 1,000 pounds of electronics. The light, simple airplane also had a full complement of instruments, ejection seats and 7 external store stations. The concept of using ground ordnance and a bomb bay had been ignored, although it did have provisions for 4 M60 medium machine guns. In spite of this growth, the YOV-10 still had great potential. It would not achieve the advantages of integration with the ground scheme of maneuver, but it did have capabilities at the low end of the performance envelope that were still valuable and unique. The Bronco performed observation, forward air control, helicopter escort, armed reconnaissance, utility light air transport and limited ground attack. The Bronco has also performed aerial radiological reconnaissance, tactical air observation, artillery and naval gunfire spotting, airborne control of tactical air support operations and frontline, low-level aerial photography. A prototype in Vietnam designed to lay smoke was extremely successful, kept in service by evaluators for several months, and only reluctantly released, was not purchased due to a perceived lack of mission. Possible modernized variant. Boeing has recently put together plans internally to build a modernized, improved version of the Bronco, called the OV-10X, to satisfy a possible Air Force requirement for a light attack plane. According to Pentagon and industry officials, while the aircraft will maintain much of its 1960s vintage rugged external design, the 21st-century modernizations would include a computerized glass cockpit, intelligent sensors and smart bomb-dropping capabilities. Boeing indicates that international interest in restarting production is growing, to compete with other light attack aircraft such as the T-6B Texan II, a 67 Dragon and AIM 314 Super Tucano. On February 3, 2010, during the Singapore Air Show, Boeing announced that the international interest for the aircraft was such that it would go on with its development even in the case it failed to win the USAF tender for 100 light attack armed reconnaissance aircraft. Design. The OV-10 has a central nacelle containing pilots and cargo, and twin booms containing twin turboprop engines. The visually distinctive item of the aircraft is the combination of the twin booms, with the horizontal stabilizer that connects them. The aircraft's design supports effective operations from forward bases. The OV-10 can perform short takeoffs and landings, including on aircraft carriers and large-deck amphibious assault ships without using catapults or arresting wires. Further, the OV-10 was designed to take off and land on unimproved sites. Repairs can be made with ordinary tools. No ground equipment is required to start the engines. And, if necessary, the engines will operate on high-octane automobile fuel with only a slight loss of power. The aircraft has responsive handling and can fly for 5.5 hours with external fuel tanks. The cockpit has extremely good visibility for a tandem pilot and co-pilot, provided by a wraparound greenhouse that is wider than the fuselage. With the second seat removed, it can carry 3,200 pounds of cargo, 5 paratroopers or 2 litter patients and an attendant. Empty weight is 6,969 pounds. Normal operating fueled weight with 2 crew is 9,908 pounds. Maximum takeoff weight is 14,446 pounds. The bottom of the fuselage contains sponsons or stub wings that improve flight performance by decreasing aerodynamic drag underneath the fuselage. The sponsons were mounted horizontally on the prototype. Testing caused them to be redesigned for production aircraft. The downward angle assured that stores carried on the sponsons jettisoned cleanly. Normally 4.308 in M60C machine guns were carried on the sponsons with the M60CS accessed through a large forward opening hatch on the top of each sponson. The sponsons also had 4 racks to carry bombs, pods or fuel. The wings outboard of the engines contained 2 additional racks, 1 per side. Racked armament in the Vietnam War was usually 7-shot 2.75 in rocket pods with white phosphorus marker rounds or high-explosive rockets, or 5 in 4-shot Zuni rocket pods. Bombs, ADS air-delivered para-dropped unattended seismic sensors, Mk6 battlefield illumination flares, and other stores were carried as well. Operational experience showed that there were some weaknesses in the OV-10's design. It is seriously underpowered. This contributed to crashes in Vietnam in sloping terrain because the pilots could not climb fast enough. While specifications state that the aircraft could reach 26,000 feet, in Vietnam the aircraft could reach only 18,000 feet. Also, no OV-10 pilot survived ditching the aircraft. Operational history: the OV-10 served in the U.S. Air Force, U.S. Marine Corps, and U.S. Navy, as well as in the service of a number of other countries. A total of 81 OV-10 Broncos were ultimately lost to all causes during the course of the Vietnam War, with the Air Force losing 64, the Navy 7 and the Marines 10. U.S. Marine Corps. The OV-10 was first acquired by the U.S. Marine Corps. Each of the Marine Corps 2 observation squadrons had 18 aircraft, a Euro 9 OV-10 as a 9 OV-10 DS night observation aircraft. A Marine Air Reserve Observation Squadron was also established. The OV-10 operated as a forward air controller and was finally phased out of the Marine Corps in 1995 following its employment during Operation Desert Storm, which also saw the final combat losses of OV-10s by U.S. forces. Among these losses were 2 USMC OV-10s being shot down due to a lack of effective infrared countermeasures. It was also thought that the slow speed made it more vulnerable to anti-aircraft weapons. Forward air control passed mostly to ground units with laser designators and digital radios and the twin-seat FA-18D Hornets. Most operational Broncos were reassigned to civil government agencies in the U.S., while some were sold to other countries. The U.S. Marine Corps YOV-10D Night Observation Gunship System program modified 2 OV-10s to include a turreted forward-looking infrared sensor, laser target designator and turreted 20 OMX M197 gun slave to the FLIRA aim point. NOGS succeeded in Vietnam, but funds to convert more aircraft were not approved. NOGS evolved into the NOS OV-10D, which included a laser designator, but no gun. U.S. Air Force. The USAF acquired the Bronco primarily as an FAC aircraft. The first combat USAF OV-10s arrived in Vietnam on July 31, 1968 as part of Operation Combat Bronco, an operational testing and evaluation of the aircraft. These test aircraft were attached to the 19th Tactical Air Support Squadron, 504th Tactical Air Support Group at Bien Ho Air Base in South Vietnam. The test roles included the full range of missions then assigned to FAC aircraft, including day and night strike direction, gunship direction, bomb damage assessment, visual reconnaissance, aerial artillery direction, and as escorts for aircraft engaged in Operation Ranch Hand. The aircraft's ability to generate smoke internally was utilized for strike direction and in 4 specific instances under conditions of reduced visibility. The smoke was seen by strike air crews before the OV-10A was detected. Operation Combat Bronco ended on October 30, 1968. After the end of Combat Bronco, the USAF began to deploy larger numbers to the 19th TAS, 20th TAS, and for out-of-country missions to the 23D TAS. The 23D TAS conducted missions in support of Operation Igloo White, Operation Prairie Fire Daniel Boone, and other special operations. In April 1969 the USAF conducted an operational exercise, called Misty Bronco, to evaluate the OV-10A's performance as a light strike aircraft. The results were positive, and as of October 1969 all USAF OV-10s were to be armed with their internal .308 and M60C machine guns, which had generally been left out during the combat Bronco evaluations and subsequent deployment. High-explosive 2.75 in rockets were also authorized for use against ground targets. In 1971, the 23D TASS OV-10A Broncos received modifications under Project Pave Nail. Carried out by LTV Electrosystems during 1970, these modifications primarily included the addition of the Pave Spot Target Laser Designator Pod, as well as a specialized night periscope and LORAN equipment. The call sign Nail was the radio handle of this squadron. These aircraft supported interdiction of troops and supplies on the Ho Chi Minh Trail by illuminating targets for laser-guided bombs dropped by McDonnell F-4 Phantom IIs. After 1974, these aircraft were converted back to an unmodified OV-10A standard. At least 157 OV-10s were delivered to the USAF before production ended in April 1969. The USAF lost 64 OV-10 Broncos during the war, to all causes. In the late 1980s, the USAF started to replace their OV-10s with OA-37B and OA-10A aircraft. Unlike the Marine Corps, the USAF did not deploy the Bronco to the Middle East in response to the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait, as it believed that the OV-10 was too vulnerable. The final two USAF squadrons equipped with a Bronco, the 19th and 21st Tactical Air Support Squadron, retired the OV-10 on September 1, 1991. U.S. Navy: the U.S. Navy formed Light Attack Squadron 4, the Black Ponies, on January 3, 1969, and operated in Vietnam from April 1969 through April 1972. The Navy used the Bronco OV-10A as a light ground attack aircraft, for interdiction of enemy logistics, and fire support of Marines, SEALs and Naval Riverine Force vessels. It succeeded in this role, although the U.S. Navy did lose 7 OV-10s during the Vietnam War to various causes. Other than OV-10 fleet replacement training done in cooperation with Air Anti-Submarine Squadron 41 at NAS North Island, California, VAL 4 was the only squadron in the U.S. Navy to ever employ the OV-10, and it was decommissioned shortly following the end of the Vietnam War. VAL 4's surviving OV-10s were subsequently transferred to the Marine Corps. International use: Colombia. In 1991, the USAF provided the Colombian Air Force with 12 OV-10As. Later, 3 ex-USMCA models were also acquired to provide part support. Colombia operates the aircraft in a coin role against an active insurgency. At least one aircraft has been lost in combat. The remaining OV-10s were upgraded to OV-10D standard. Indonesia purchased 12 OV-10F aircraft and operates them in coin operations similar to the U.S. Navy's Vietnam missions with their Broncos, but have retrofitted .50 in Browning heavy machine guns in place of the light .308 in machine guns. These aircraft were vital in the invasion of East Timor and ensuing coin operations. In 1977, they were also used during the aerial bombardments of among villages near Freeport-McMoran area of operations, West Papua, in response to OPM attacks on the mining company facilities, and of Dani villages in Baliam Valley, also in West Papua, in response to rebellion against enforced participation in the Indonesian general election. Philippines. The Philippine Air Force received 24 OV-10s from U.S. stocks in 1991. Later followed by a further 9 from the United States, and 8 ex-Thai Air Force OV-10CS in 2003–2004. The OV-10s are operated by the 16th Attack Squadron and 25th Composite Attack Squadron of the 15th Strike Wing, based in Sangley Point, Cavite. The PAF flies Broncos on search and rescue and coin operations in various parts of the Philippines. The first 2 women combat pilots in the PAF flew OV-10s with the 16th. This squadron flew anti-terrorist operations in the Jolo Islands. PAF OV-10 Broncos have been repeatedly used in airstrikes against Moro Islamic Liberation Front positions during ongoing fighting in 2011, and 2 were used in an airstrike on February 2012 which resulted in the death of 3 Abu Sayyaf and Jemaah Islamiyah commanders, among others. Philippine Air Force OV-10s have been reportedly modified in order to employ modern smart bombs. Thailand. The Royal Thai Air Force purchased 32 new OV-10C aircraft in the early 1970s for coin usage. Reportedly Broncos won most Thai bombing competitions until F-5s became operational. At one time Thailand even flew OV-10s as air defense aircraft. In 2004, RTAF donated most of the OV-10s to the Philippines. 2 OV-10 survivors are displayed in the Tango Squadron Wing 41 Museum in Chiang Mai and the RTAF Museum in Bangkok. The remaining OV-10s will be donated to the PAF in 2011. Venezuela. The Venezuelan Air Force has operated a number of new-build OV-10s and ex-USAF OV-10s over the years. On November 27, 1992, the aircraft were widely used by mutinied officers who staged an attempted coup d'état copyright tat against former President Carlos Andrés Copyright S. Par Copyright Res. The rebels dropped bombs and launched rockets against police and government buildings in Caracas. 4 Broncos were lost during the uprising, including 2 shot down by a loyalist General Dynamics F-16 Fighting Falcon. Venezuela's OV-10s are to be retired in the coming years. Originally Venezuela attempted to procure Embraer Super Tucano aircraft to replace the OV-10, but no deal was achieved which President Chavez claimed was due to the result of pressure from the U.S. government. The Venezuelan government has decided not to replace them with new fixed-wing aircraft. Rather, the Venezuelan Air Force is replacing them with the Russian-made Mi-28 attack helicopter. Other use, NASA. NASA has used a number of Broncos for various research programs, including studies of low-speed flight carried out with the third prototype in the 1970s, and studies on noise and wake turbulence. 1 OV-10 remained in use at NASA's Langley Base in 2009 with 3 additional aircraft obtained from the Department of State formerly used in drug eradication efforts. U.S. Department of State Air Wing. The Department of State aircraft are former Air Force OV-10A and Marine Corps OV-10D aircraft operated under contract by DynCorp International in support of U.S. drug interdiction and eradication efforts in South America. The aircraft carry civilian U.S. aircraft registration numbers and, when not forward deployed, are home-based at a DynCorp facility at Patrick Air Force Base, Florida. Bureau of Land Management. The Bureau of Land Management acquired 7 OV-10s for use as firefighting aircraft, including the YOV-10A prototype. In this role, they would lead firefighting air tankers through their intended flight path over their target area. The aircraft were operated in their basic military configurations, but with their ejection seats disabled. The aircraft's existing smoke system was used to mark the path for the following air tankers. With the age of the aircraft, spare parts were difficult to obtain, and the BLM retired their fleet in 1999. California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection. The California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection has acquired a number of OV-10s, including the 6 surviving aircraft from the BLM and 13 former U.S. Marine Corps aircraft in 1993 to replace their existing Cessna 02 Skymasters as air attack aircraft. The CAL FIRE Broncos fly with a crew of 2, a contract pilot and the CAL FIRE ATGS or Air Tactical Group Supervisor, whose job it is to coordinate all aerial assets on a fire with the incident commander on the ground. Thus, besides serving as a tanker lead in aircraft, the OV-10A is also the aerial platform from which the entire air operation is coordinated. Variants: YOV-10A, 7 prototype NA300s with 2 600s HPT-76 G6/8 engines, last one was flown with YT-74P1 engines. OV-10A, original production version with enlarged wing and 715s HPT-76 G10/12 engines. Distinguished by a long wire HF antenna between the center rear stabilizer and the central nacelle. 114 for the United States Marine Corps and 157 for the United States Air Force. OV-10B, target towing variant for Germany, with a target towing pod mounted beneath the fuselage. A clear dome replaced the rear cargo door. The rear seat was moved to the cargo bay to look backwards out the dome, 18 built. Known as the OV-10B, Z, when fitted with an additional J85 GE4 turbojet. OV-10B, Z, a variation of the German target tug, with one J85 GE4 turbojet mounted in a nacelle above the fuselage. A total of 18 aircraft were supplied to the Germans. OV-10C, export version for Thailand. Based on the OV-10A, 32 built. OV-10D, the prototype night observation gunship variant developed as the OV-10D, at least one conversion from OV-10A. OV-10D, second-generation Bronco developed under the NOGS program. The D model was an extensively modified OV-10A airframe, adding a forward-looking infrared night vision system with a turret-mounted camera under an extended nose, visually distinct from the short rounded nose of the A model. The D also has bigger engines and larger fiberglass propellers. Other noticeable external differences are the chaff dispensers installed midway down the booms and infrared suppressive exhaust stacks. 17 modified from OV-10A. OV-10D Plus, the next USMC upgrade, consisting of A and D aircraft being extensively reworked at MCAS Cherry Point Naval Air Rework Facility with new wiring and strengthened wings. Engine instrumentation was changed from round dials to tape readouts. OV-10E, export version for Venezuela. Based on the OV-10A, 16 built, OV-10F, export version for Indonesia. Based on the OV-10A, 16 built. OV-10M, a full-bladed version of OV-10A. Modified to accommodate bigger engines with larger fiberglass props. Equipped with square chaff dispensers midway down the booms and with new wiring and strengthened wings. Engine instrumentation was changed from round dials to tape readouts by Marsh Aviation for the Philippine Air Force. OV-10T, proposed cargo version of the OV-10, capable of carrying 8 to 12 troops or 4,500 pounds of cargo, studied during the Vietnam War but not proceeded with. OV-10X, proposed version for the USAF's light attack contract. The X will feature upgraded avionics and weapons capabilities. Operators, a Colombian Air Force 7 in service. A German Air Force, 18 new OV-10BS all retired in 1990. A Indonesian Air Force, 16 new OV-10s all grounded and to be replaced with Embraer AM314 Super Tucano. A Royal Moroccan Air Force, 6 former USMC OV-10s, all retired. A Philippine Air Force 12 OV-10AC in service, more in storage. To be replaced with Embraer AM314 Super Tucano. A Thailand, Royal Thai Air Force, 32 new OV-10CS all retired in 2003, a United States, NASA, 4 aircraft based at NASA Langley Research Center, Department of State, primarily in Colombia, United States Air Force all retired in 1991, United States Marine Corps all retired in 1995, United States Navy 2 in evaluation for special operations, 18 USMC loaned in Vietnam for operation by VAL 4. A Venezuelan Air Force, 16 new OV-10FS, 5 in service. Civil operators, California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection. Survivors. The production mock-up of the OV-10A, CNNAA001, made in Columbus, Ohio, is on display at the Fort Worth Aviation Museum, Fort Worth, Texas, along with 2 other OV-10s. The original prototype YOV-10A was on display at the Yankee Air Museum at Willow Run Airport near Ypsilanti, Michigan. It had been fully restored by a former OV-10 crew chief. The aircraft was destroyed along with several other museum aircraft in a fire on October 9, 2004. Another YOV-10A was one of the aircraft transferred to the BLM and subsequently to CAL FIRE, where it serves as a part source. There are currently 2 OV-10BS located at the Imperial War Museum Dewford in England, both owned by Invicta Aviation. One of these aircraft was airworthy and on the UK register as GBZGK, and wore its former German Air Force markings. This aircraft crashed at Cotswold Airport on July 10, 2012. An OV-10A, AFSAIR. Number 68-3787, is on display at the National Museum of the United States Air Force at Wright-Patterson AFB near Dayton, Ohio. An OV-10A, AFSAIR. Number 68-3825, is on display at the Fort Worth Aviation Museum, Fort Worth, Texas. An OV-10A, AFSAIR. Number 67-14626, is on display at the Hurlburt Field Air Park at Hurlburt Field, Florida. An OV-10A, AFSAIR. Number 67-14623, is on display at the Museum of Aviation, Robbins AFB, Georgia. An OV-10D, BU-No 155472, in Navy markings is on display at the National Naval Aviation Museum at NAS Pensacola, Florida. This OV-10 was received by the NNAM on October 21, 2004 when it was transferred from the National Museum of the Marine Corps at MCB Quantico, Virginia. BU-No 155472 was originally an OV-10A which flew with Valve 4 during the Vietnam War, but was later transferred to the Marine Corps and upgraded to OV-10D standard in 1991. Bureau number 155472 is currently repainted and displayed in the scheme of Valve 4. An OV-10A, BU-No 155426, in Marine Corps markings is on display at the Fort Worth Aviation Museum, Fort Worth, Texas. An OV-10D, BU-No 155494, in Marine Corps markings is on display at the Flying Leathernecks Museum at MCAS Miramar, California. Another OV-10D on display at the National Naval Aviation Museum at NAS Pensacola, Florida was formerly on display at the Carolinas Aviation Museum in Charlotte, North Carolina. The OV-10D originally came from MCAS Cherry Point, North Carolina. In 2005, the NMNA recalled the aircraft and loaned the Carolinas Aviation Museum a very early model AV-8A Harrier as a replacement. The European Museum of Fighter Aircraft in Montélimar, France, has two German Air Force OV-10B, one on static display and another one still flying. The latter one may be seen during air shows. An OV-10D, BU-No 155499, with Marine Observation Squadron 1 markings is on display at the Pima Air and Space Museum, adjacent to Davis-Monthan AFB in Tucson, Arizona. It is on loan from the National Naval Aviation Museum and the National Museum of the Marine Corps. An OV-10D, BU-No 155409, is on display at the Valiant Air Command Warbird Museum at Space Coast Regional Airport in Titusville, FL. This aircraft previously served with Marine Observation Squadron 2 and was later transferred to the U.S. Department of State Air Wing at nearby Patrick AFB, FL. There is an ex-Bundeswehr OV-10B on outdoor display at the Militär Currency Historisches Museum der Bundeswehr in Dresden, Germany. An OV-10C, with Royal Thai Air Force markings is on display at the Royal Thai Air Force Museum in Bangkok. An OV-10F of Indonesian Air Force is on display next to the major intersection at Jombang, East Java. OV-10D on display outdoors at Mid-America Air Museum, Liberal, Kansas. Specifications, OV-10A, data from MESCO, general characteristics, crew, 2, length, 41 feet 7 inches, wingspan, 40 feet 0 in, height, 15 feet 2 in, wing area, 290.95 FTA squared, empty weight, 6,893 pounds, max takeoff weight, 14,444 pounds, power plant, TUA, Garrett T-76G 410 412 turboprop, 715 horsepower each, performance, maximum speed, 281 miles per hour, range, 576 miles, service ceiling, 24,000 feet, armament. Guns, 4 7.62 x 51 mm 60C machine guns, hardpoints, 5 fuselage and 2 underwing A and provisions to carry combinations of rockets 7 or 19 tube launchers for 2.75 inches FFARs or 2 or 4 tube launchers for 5 FFARs, missiles, AIM-9 Sidewinder, bombs, up to 500 pounds, other, Su-11 Para or Mk4 Mod 0 gun pods. OV-10D, data from MESCO, general characteristics, crew, 2, length, 44 feet 0 inches, wingspan, 40 feet 0 in, height, 15 feet 2 in, wing area, 290.95 FTA squared, empty weight, 6,893 pounds, loaded weight, 9,908 pounds, max takeoff weight, 14,444 pounds, power plant, TUA, Garrett T-76G 420-421st turboprop, 1,040 horsepower each, tailplane span 14 feet, 7 in, performance, maximum speed, 288 miles per hour, range, 1,382 miles, service ceiling, 30,000 feet, armament, guns, 1x20mm M197 cannon or 4x7.62x51mm 60C machine guns, hardpoints, 5 fuselage and 2 underwing and provisions to carry combinations of rockets 7 or 19 tube launchers for 2.75 inches FFARs/2.75 WAFARs or 2 or 4 tube launchers for 5 FFARs or WAFARs, missiles, AIM-9 Sidewinder on wings only, bombs, up to 500 pounds. See also, aircraft of comparable role, configuration and era, Convair Model 48 Charger, FMAIA 58 Pure Cara OV-1 Mohawk, Soko J-20 Craighugh, Embraer M314 Super Tucano, references, notes. Bibliography. Further reading, Harrison, Marshall. A Lonely Kind of War, a Forward Air Controller. New York, Presido Press, 1997. ISBN 978-0-89141-638-8. LaVille, Kit. Flying Black Ponies, the Navy's Close Air Support Squadron in Vietnam. Annapolis, Maryland, Naval Institute Press, 2009. ISBN 978-1-59114-468-7. External links, the OV-10 Bronco Association site, historical documentation by the inventor, Colonel K. P. Rice, USMC retired, NTSB report LAX 97GA205 detailing a BLM OV-10A fatal crash, archived on landings.com, Bronco photos and drawings on militaryphotos.net, company brochure on proposed modernized OV-10D, excerpt from the film One Tough Ride, the story of the OV-10 Bronco, Tough Little Jungle Fighter, Popular Science, December 1964.